Okay, so this is lesson 8-8. Now the last lesson was finding the perimeter of a rectangle when there were fractions involved. This lesson is about finding the area when there are fractions involved. So I want you to pause the video for a second and tell yourself what the formula is for finding the area of a rectangle. Okay, so finding the area of a rectangle, the formula is just area is equal to length times width. Now, remember, you don't do length times 2 and then width times 2. It's just one of the lengths times the width. Because if you remember when you were younger and you had to do the cubes inside there, you would do one length times one width is what you would do to get to the number of cubes that were in there. So if we have a length of 5 and a width of 2/3, then you would plug it into your formula, and the area would be equal to 5 times 2/3. Now we know when we multiply, we take our whole number times our numerator, which would be 10, and our denominator is thirds. So 10/3. Okay, let's go on to the next one. We have 4 3/10 for length and 3 meters for a width. So one of them has a fraction, the other one does not. So go ahead and pause and solve for the area. Okay, so again, the area would be equal to the length, which is 4 3/10, times the width, which would be 3. So I take my whole number, 4, times my 3, which would be 12, and then my whole number times my 3/10. Remember, it's just like if we were doing partial products multiplication. 4 3/10 times 3. And 4 3/10 is made up of 4 and 3/10. And 3 is just made up of 3. So then you would multiply 4 times 3, which would be your 12. And then 3/10 times 3, which would be 9/10. And then you would add them together. So 12 and 9/10 would be your area for this one. Okay, so 12 and 9/10. Okay, the next one, we have a perimeter of 8 2/8, and the width is 1 1/8. So there's an extra step here. So first of all, you have to figure out what the length is going to be before you can figure out the area. So if we know that the perimeter is 8 2/8, we know that the formula for that is 1 1/8 plus 1 1/8 plus the length plus the length. So 8 2/8 is equal to 2 2/8 plus both of our lengths. So if we do 8 2/8 minus 2 2/8, which is how we would figure out what was missing, we would get a total of 6. And we wouldn't have any 8s left because they all subtracted. So if we have 6 left and we have to split that into 2 parts, then that means your area, or your length would be 3. And then you can solve for your area. So you take your 3 times your 1 1/8. So 3 times 1 would be 3. And then 3 times 1/8 would be 3/8. So 3 3/8 would be the area of that rectangle. Okay, the next one, again, they give you the perimeter, 13 2/4. And then you have to solve for your width before you can do your area. So we have 13 2/4 is equal to 6 plus 6 plus our width plus our width. So 13 2/4 is equal to 12 plus our width plus our width. So if we subtract that, 13 2/4 minus 12, we are going to get 1 2/4. And then we have to split that in half. So half of 1 would be 1/2, and half of 2/4 would be 1/4. So now we have to figure out how to combine that to get our width. So we would have to change one of those into fourths. So we would change 1/2 into fourths. So 1/2 is equal to 2/4 plus 1/4. So our width would be 3/4. Okay. So now, since we have our width of 3/4, then we can figure out our area. So we have to do 6 times 3/4. So 6 times 3 would be 18, and our denominator stays the same. So 18/4, or if you want to change that into an improper fraction, it would be 4 2/4 or 4 1/2. All right. Okay, so now we have the area, and we know that this side is 4/10. So we have to plug that into our equation. So we know that 3 2/10 is equal to 4/10 times, I'm going to say L, even though they say X meters, but 4/10 times my length is going to be 3 2/10. So one thing that I could do here is change 3 2/10 into an improper fraction. That would be the easiest thing to do. So 3 2/10 changed into an improper fraction would be 32/10. So we have to multiply 4/10 times something to get that. So 4/10 times what will give you 32/10? Well, it would be 8, okay? Because if we want 32 on top, we have to multiply 4 times 8. So 4 times 8 would be 32, and then our tenths would be on the bottom. So our length would be 8. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and post the home link. So you go ahead and you can work out the home link and then come back later to see the answers. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, guys.